Cyclic, Quantum, Cosmology, CQC. Episode 6. The Modern Ether and the Mechanics of the Invisible. Introduction. The Great Intuition of the Ether. For centuries, physics has sought to answer a fundamental question. What is empty space? The idea that space is an absolute nothingness, a passive and cold stage, is actually a recent historical anomaly. For millennia, the human mind logically rejected the concept of an absolute vacuum, horror vacui, intuiting that space must possess its own physical substance, an elastic medium through which to transmit forces, waves, and movements. Aristotle spoke of the quintessence, or ether, a crystalline and fluid matter that filled the cosmos, allowing the harmonious movement of celestial bodies. Descartes described space as a plenum, totally full, hypothesizing that gravity was not a magical force at a distance, but the result of actual mechanical vortices of this fluid matter. The 19th century theorized the luminiferous ether, an elastic and infinitely rigid medium that allowed light to propagate as a wave, exactly as sound does in the air. Today, with our model, we take this historical intuition to its definitive step. Strings and their grid are not abstract speculations. They are the modern quantum and geometric mechanical version of the ancient ether. Space has a tangible structure, its own physical density, and its own elasticity. We do not move in space, we move through the substance of space. The string, as a multidimensional anchor. To understand the universe, we must redefine the single string, moving beyond the mathematical limitations of conventional theory. Manos's definition: the string is a geometric mechanical hinge or anchor. It does not belong entirely to our four-dimensional space-time, but roots itself in the higher dimensions of the bulk. What we perceive and isolate in our universe is not the string in its totality, but only its projection or its anchoring point on our fabric. It is of fundamental importance to make a crucial clarification to avoid theoretical misunderstandings. The brain is pure energy. The mechanical memory of returning to equilibrium is held and exercised solely by the brain. The connection between strings, however, is solely and exclusively a mechanical act. The string acts as an invisible interface through which the multidimensional laws of the bulk translate into everything we are, see, and touch. This definition rests on a precise and elegant mechanical dynamic: spin, tension, and connection. Tension and memory. When the string is torn and snaps from the large sheets of the bulk during the primordial impact, it undergoes an elastic deformation, like a stretched spring. It possesses an intrinsic tension, which is a mechanical and geometric tendency to return to its original length and coordinate of equilibrium, conveying the brain energy it carries on board. Spin as a vibrational signature. The string with limbs. Spin in our model is not the abstract quantum number of academic physics, but the physical oscillation and three-dimensional torsion of limbs or geometric extensions of the string that reach out and vibrate in the extra dimensions of the bulk, up to 11 dimensions. Each string has its specific vibratory signature imprinted by the impact. The connection, the hookup. When two strings cross in the grid, their extra-dimensional limbs interact or a part of them, remembering that the string also connects directly with the brains. Resolution of a fundamental inconsistency. Contrary to classical interpretations, the initial interlocking of strings does not create stable matter at this stage. Strings solely create the space within which everything moves. It is not yet possible to speak of heavy matter. This example of strings interlocking or sliding away from each other like incompatible gears finds its true application in the encounter with the nearby second Big Bang, where strings can vibrate with different spins and frequencies. In that context, if even a partial geometric compatibility exists between the two systems, the next evolutionary phase is activated, the triggering of cosmic inflation and the differentiation of dark matter and dark energy. The mechanics of the break. Crystals of space. The primordial break in the multidimensional bulk The kinematic impact between the large sheets, the primordial brains, destroys their geometric continuity. Crystals of space. From this break, volumetric fragments endowed with torsion are born. These pieces of empty space crystal are catapulted into our subsystem, initially carrying the brain's energy on board in a 1-to-1 equilibrium ratio. The search for equilibrium. Once movement and expansion begin, the system loses its original equilibrium coordinate, the pebble paradox. Strings undergo continuous deformations and exchanges of energetic charges. The memory of the brains. It is essential to reiterate that only the brains carry memory as energy, since energy resides in them. Strings are mere transport vectors, geometric structures totally devoid of their own memory. The perennial tendency of these fragments to restore the original shape of the large sheet prior to the impact, nullifying the deformation suffered, constitutes the mechanical memory that only the brains carry with them. Macroscopic gravity. This microscopic memory of returning to the geometric equilibrium of the original zero is the physical origin of that force we call gravity. The cosmic binary code, the parallelism with computer science. All the complexity of the universe can be reduced to a fundamental binary combination between just two entities, strings and brains, exactly like the most complex software written in lines of 0 seconds and 1 second. Date 0. The empty string, the bit off, represents the string with no brain on board. Geometrically, it is neutral space, the invisible elastic grid devoid of mass or energy charge. It constitutes the physical support, the channel necessary for information to exist and propagate. It is the silence that allows sound to exist. State 1. The charged string, the bit on, represents the string hosting a brain, energy. When the brain comes on board, the bit turns on. Active information is born, a specific vibration that we measure as mass, electric charge, wave, or photon. The evolutionary line of charge. Hint at the microcosm. If we imagine an evolutionary line to represent this energetic growth, we have the empty string, the geometric zero, at the beginning. As an ever-increasing number of brains climbs onto the vector, perturbations are generated that we interpret as waves of the spectrum. This accumulation rises along the frequencies until it reaches a limiting saturation level, the limiting level of the photon. If at this point, even an infinitesimal fraction of extra energy, brain, is introduced, the system collapses, crumples, and transforms into what we interpret as heavy matter. Continuing to absorb and accumulate charges in the lattice, the brains on board constantly increase, leading to that growth which culminates in the heavy elementary particle, until they encounter a new limiting saturation, that of heavy elements, radioactive elements, which represent the maximum scale limit of stable elements. In macroscopic reality, what we see is the union of billions of these strings carrying billions of brains on board, a complex architecture whose details we will unveil in the near future. The writing of reality, physics, is nothing more than the continuous combination of these two states. A string with two brains on board, 1-to-1 configuration, and an adjacent empty string, 0, create a local variation in density. The universe writes itself through this geometric mechanical alphabet. Where there is a brain, there is a force impulse, 1. Where there is only the string, there is pure geometric elasticity, 0. The encounter of the two Big Bangs and the mechanics of inflation. This passage mechanically explains the moment when the primordial universe changes geometric scale in a sudden and extremely violent way. The stasis of the first Big Bang initially, the universe derived from the first kinematic impact, reached a state of relative equilibrium. It is a peaceful universe, a primordial soup full of waves traveling in a constant, linear, and fundamentally unalterable situation through the eons. The intrusion of the second Big Bang, a second massive kinematic impact, occurs in the bulk. An immense shockwave, loaded with new strings and brains characterized by different vibrations and spins, invades the area of relative equilibrium of the first universe, The mechanical explanation of inflation. When these two enormous waves meet, the strings of the two Big Bangs find themselves to be partially compatible. Their spins and frequencies begin to hook and interlock at frantic rates within the lattice. This mass engagement triggers a chain elastic reaction of titanic proportions. The volumetric explosion. The violent union of these strings instantly releases the accumulated kinetic energy, destabilizing the grid of the first Big Bang. The fabric of space itself is stretched and elongated outward in an instantaneous and extremely violent manner. This sudden, immense increase in geometric volume is what traditional astrophysics observes and defines as cosmic inflation. It is not a magical expansion, but the mechanical response of the elastic lattice that dilates to accommodate and integrate the intrusion of the second wave of strings. The evolutionary sieve and the recycling of entropy. After the violent push of cosmic inflation, the system begins to cool and settle. The infinite possibilities of vibration and spin of the strings from the two Big Bangs pass through a rigorous mechanical selection, the sieve, which generates three precise destinies. Ordinary matter, the coupling. Strings from the first and second Big Bang with compatible spins complete their engagement, accumulating and structuring reactive brains. This leads to an evolution toward the state of increasingly saturated waves, up to the photon, and subsequently to heavy matter, for example, atoms, light, chemistry, and all visible structures. Dark energy, the free brains. These represent the brains deriving from the second impact that did not find any string with a compatible spin to latch onto. Lacking the geometric body of the string, they float free in the interstices of the grid. Behaving like an incompressible fluid, they exert a constant pressure that forces the three-dimensional grid to continuously expand to make room for their presence. Note, as described in previous chapters, the accelerated expansion on a macroscopic scale is assisted by the continuous release of new virgin space strings by central galactic black holes. Dark matter, the residual strings, strings connected with brains that lack the requirements to interact with the new energetic flows of the second impact. They remain excluded from the main dynamic, like an invisible residual broth. They have a geometric mechanical presence in the lattice that does not interact with the light spectrum, but exerts gravitational attraction through the intrinsic elastic memory of their own brains. The resolution of the entropy paradox, the Tolman challenge. A major obstacle for cyclic cosmologies is the accumulation of disorder, entropy, from one cycle to the next. Our model solves this problem in an exquisitely mechanical way. Black holes are the recyclers of the system. They absorb complex matter, strings that are charged, saturated, and worn out by entropy, break its bonds, separate the brains, and release virgin strings into the cosmos, stripped of all previous information. Essentially pure spatial grid at state zero. This cleaning mechanism resets local entropy at each cycle, allowing the system to regenerate indefinitely without accumulating thermodynamic degradation. Gravity. In the macrocosm. The paradox of the two coffee beans. Zero gravity behavior. If we place two coffee beans in the vacuum of deep space, isolated from other forces, after a sufficiently long time, they will begin to attract each other until they touch, as recounted by an astronaut on the space station. The infinitesimal explanation, the single coffee bean, does not generate a force out of nowhere. It is composed of billions of aggregated and knotted strings and brains. The sum of tensions, remembering that it is the brains that carry the elastic memory of returning to equilibrium. Each of these brains loaded onto the strings inside the bean exerts an infinitesimal tension on the surrounding fabric of space. When billions of these microtensions add up inside the bean, the combined elastic effect becomes a measurable macroscopic force, capable of moving the two bodies toward each other. Gravity is not a magical action at a distance, but the macroscopic resultant of infinitesimal mechanical tensions. The experimental signature, how to test the model, to scientifically prove that gravity is an elastic tension of the grid and not a passive geometric curvature. As Einstein claimed, physicists can look for anomalies at microscopic scales. The Planck scale, or over enormous galactic distances. At these extreme scales, the discrete nature of the spatial grid should manifest tiny fluctuations, infinitesimal elastic deviations not predicted by general relativity. This is one of many points ready to be translated into a mathematical model to be developed and tested. Relationship with M-theory, close but different. These reflections and definitions come very close to the core concepts of M-theory, the 11-dimensional evolution of string theory, but they maintain a unique identity and mechanism that profoundly differentiates them. Points of contact. Why they are close. Extra dimensions. 11 dimensions. Both models recognize that 4-dimensional spacetime is insufficient to explain physical reality and hypothesize extra dimensions accessible only at a microscopic or vibrational level. The coexistence of strings and branes. M-theory introduced multidimensional membranes, p-branes, alongside strings. This model uses exactly these two entities as the basic building blocks of cyclic cosmology. Vibration as origin. In both visions, elementary particles are not material points, but the result of the way the fundamental element vibrates. Crucial differences. Why they are not similar. Mechanical approach versus abstract mathematics. M-theory is a highly abstract mathematical model based on supersymmetry equations. This model, by contrast, is rigorously mechanical and geometric. It reasons through impacts, elastic tensions, physical fragmentations, crystals of space, and direct couplings, the limbs of the strings. Cyclic and evolutionary origin, the sieve, in M-theory. Strings vibrate in a landscape of infinite possible universes, the multiverse, without a true evolutionary direction guided by historical events. In this model, the properties of strings, spin, compatibility, are the direct historical result of two specific successive kinematic impacts, the first and second Big Bang. There is an evolutionary type of selection that separates ordinary matter from dark matter. Space is a generated entity. In conventional physics and string theory, space-time is often the field in which strings move. In this model, space itself is made of strings. There is no empty space containing strings. It is the empty strings, zero, elastically connected to each other, that weave the grid we call space. Anticipation of the next episode, the double slit, and the secret of the photon. In subsequent episodes, we will go deeper into the study and interpretation of these phenomena, seeking a vision that coherently explains their behavior. In the next episode, episode 7, we will mainly talk about the photon and how this model explains the famous challenge of the double slit experiment, in which the photon behaves as both a wave and a mass. We will understand, through purely geometric mechanical logic, what happens when light passes through the slits and interacts with matter. We have reached the end of this chapter, a journey that has led us to dismantle the foundations of what current physics calls dark energy and dark matter, ultimately revealing the geometric engine that lights the stars. But this model does not want to remain just a theory. It wants to be a cultural and scientific revolution. And to achieve this, it takes a team. Today, we turn to you on 3 different levels. The universe is mechanical, elastic, and simple. Help us prove it. Thank you for being with us, and see you in the next episode.